going to entail anyone who joins ERIC has got to send out a mailing every federal election cycle to eligible but unregistered voters. Well, obviously in Florida, because we're a bigger state, that's going to be more costly than some other states. So we anticipate about a $1.3 million cost. We're going to ask the legislature to do it. My sense is because they already authorized us to join, that there's enough of a sense there that would make sense. And I think also just the fact that all the supervisors really think that this makes sense for us. So that's what we're doing. And we think that this should be in place for list maintenance in advance of the 2020 general election. I mean, that's certainly our goal. So I'll let Secretary Lee come up and say a few things.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Governor Ron DeSantis for making this important announcement today. Since taking office, Governor DeSantis has shown incredible leadership on elections issues. From election security to voter registration, Governor DeSantis has taken action to put Florida in the best posture possible for safe and secure elections with accurate voter registration rolls and minimum voter fraud. After Governor DeSantis appointed me as Secretary of State, I met with the supervisors of election to hear their thoughts on this issue, and supervisors were unanimous in their support of joining ERIC. By joining ERIC, our state will be able to cross-check voter data with the 29 other member states. That will help us identify duplicate registrations and outdated records from voters who have moved away or passed away, leading to cleaner and more accurate voter rolls. Maintaining accurate voter rolls is an important part of election security. It reduces the possibility for voter fraud, increases efficiency, and saves money. As the governor mentioned, ERIC also improves voter registration by providing information to member states to contact potentially eligible but unregistered voters with instructions on how to register to vote. ERIC member states contact potential voters every 2 years ahead of any federal general election. This will lead to increased voter registration in Florida and more citizens engaged in the electoral process. All voter registration and list maintenance activities are conducted in accordance with state and federal law, and the transfer of information between member states and ERIC is completely secure and privacy is protected. The Florida Department of State stands ready to work with Governor DeSantis, the Florida legislature, ERIC, and the supervisors of election as we move forward with the implementation of this important program for Florida. At this time, Tammy Jones, the president of the State Association of Supervisors of Elections, has a remark.
I just want to thank Governor DeSantis for being here today and for sharing this incredible announcement with the Supervisor of Elections. It has been a top priority of the supervisors to have Florida join the Electronic Registration Information Center, and thanks to your leadership, that is now a reality. I, along with all supervisor elections, greatly appreciate the time you took to look into ERIC and to understand the benefits it will bring to our state. I also want to thank Secretary Lee for her support and advocacy for this issue. The information that we will receive as members of ERIC will help supervisors maintain more accurate voter registration rolls, which is a critical component to running elections and ensuring the security and integrity of our elections. Supervisor elections continue to work closely with Secretary Lee on the Joint Election Security Initiative, and we greatly appreciate the strong partnership we have with her and the Florida Department of State. Thank you again, Governor DeSantis, for your leadership and for being a champion for fair and secure elections in Florida.
All right, thank you. Well, thanks. I'm happy to take a couple questions before we get out of town. Yes, sir.
Mike Schneider, Associate Press. That's probably a question for either Secretary Lee or Supervisor Jones. Do you all have any figures on the number of Floridians who may have been registered in another state and any evidence that led to fraud?
We do not. That's information that will be available to us upon joining ERIC.
And do you think it's Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands?
We will have that information once we join and are able to share with the other 29 member states.
I mean, I just would say, we have 1,000 people moving here a day. Now, obviously, they're not all eligible to vote. Some are minors or what have you. But, I mean, I doubt very many of them call their supervisor wherever they're leaving and say, hey, take me off. And there's nothing nefarious about that. It's just, human nature. You're moving. You're more looking to kind of get registered here. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of duplicate registrations. Now, I don't think most of those people are voting twice. I mean, I don't, but it's just helpful to be able to see that and make sure that all the states have accurate rolls. Yes, sir.
What kind of information will be exchanged here? Because, perfect example, there was a Ron DeSantis who donated to your opponent in the last election, lives in New Jersey. Names are similar, even a name like yours. What kind of information will be in here to ensure that the wrong Ron DeSantis is kicked off the rolls?
So if a voter appears to be registered in more than one state, that voter will be notified by their local supervisor of election that there appears to be a duplicate registration. And he or she will be given an opportunity to come and communicate with their supervisor of elections to ensure that if appropriate, they remain on their county's voter rolls.
And what happens too, though, is if you're, say, in New York and Florida, and you get notified and you don't respond, but you then vote in Florida, then you're inactive, but then the fact that you vote means you stay on the rolls. Then if you don't vote in New York after 2 cycles, then they will just take off naturally. So there's kind of a process that even if people aren't responding, as long as they are actually still voting, they're not going to end up getting removed. It's only when they're not voting after 2 cycles that they would be removed off of ERIC. And so to me, that it makes sense, because if you are registered in Florida, and you're still registered somewhere else, but you're only voting in Florida, well, then obviously, that's a legitimate registration. Yes?
Governor, there's been a call for a special session to address guns in Florida from Democrats. Is that something that you support?
No, I think the legislature is not going to go for it. What I think we should look to do in the next session is build off what I've put forward in terms of this threat assessment. You saw we had a guy in Florida. When you're taking these warning signs seriously, and then you have a system in place that could have the necessary interventions, you're in a situation where you could potentially stop some really dangerous people. And just in terms of that takes resources, it takes initiative. But if you look at that Stoneman Douglas report, they surveyed a lot of these incidences over the last 10, 20 years, and the vast, vast majority were not just out of the blue. These were people that, obviously in Parkland, everyone knew this guy was a problem. And so I think having that, so FDLE's been doing it. Obviously, they brought the charges against the guy here in Florida. There's more that needs to be done. They've met with different people in the private sector to try to see how you can leverage analytics and data to do this. I'm not sure we're there yet, but I think we can get there. But that's probably going to require a little bit of investment, but I think that's worth it, and I think that has a chance to really bear fruit. And of course, as you know, Florida did a lot with firearms. I mean, they're talking at D.C. with like the red flag and all that. Florida has done that, and I think there's been like 1,600 orders that have been done for permanent based on people who were found to be dangerous. Yes.
How this system works?
Hold on, let me do. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, again, Mellissa Thomas with Florida National News. This could be for you or anyone, please, but do you personally feel that after the influx of the folks that came in with Hurricane Maria, did that provide a greater sense of urgency to get this done, to get Florida incorporated into, to be a member state of the ERIC system?
It didn't affect me. I just think that when I came in, we had been authorized. I was asked to look at it, so I did. And, obviously we did get people from Maria, but we've gotten probably way more from other states if you look just over the last however many years. So I just think it's just a fact recognition that we live in a very dynamic state. I mean, it's constantly changing. People are obviously moving here, and we just want to make sure that we're in the best possible stance to be able to do it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a recent study from University of Florida shows that about 4 out of every 5 former felons will be ineligible to get their voter rights restored because of fines, fees, and restitutions. Is that really what the people of Florida voted for in the last election when they voted for Amendment 4? Well,
so a study is not actually getting all the data, probably, because I've asked my folks, Do we even know how many people owe restitution? And you need 67 different investigations into each state. That obviously is very cumbersome. But I would say that, what did the people vote for? The proponents of the amendment argued in front of the Supreme Court about what the ballot language meant, and the Supreme Court asked them, completing all terms of your sentence, does that mean incarceration, probation, restitution, fines, and fees as a result of sentence? And the proponent of the amendment said, yes, absolutely. Everything that you're sentenced to, you have to do. And then 2 days after the election, the ACLU, who's now complaining about this, wrote a letter to Rick Scott's Secretary of State saying, now that Amendment 4 is passed, make sure you have an appropriate process so that you can identify the people who need to complete fine, fees, restitution, incarceration. I guess they were worried about other like parking tickets or whatever. So that was 2 days after the election they said it. So I would say, I think that most people would say if you've committed a felony and you've harmed somebody and you're ordered to make that person whole from what you've committed, that there would be an expectation that you would do that. I think that's what most voters probably think, but I think the text of the summary clearly would say that that's the case. And I think that's what will end up being done out. And I think it's also interesting, I wanted the legislature to get involved because we would have just been doing some of this on our own, like what type of offenses are sexual offenses that don't count or this count. And I just thought for them to do it. But I think the way they did it is actually more liberal than what the actual amendment had, because the amendment did not have any accommodation for people who were indigent. The legislature provided that. And so if you owe $500 in restitution, you can actually go to the court and say, I just can't pay it, but I'd like to do that, and the court can give you relief. The amendment provided no pathway for that. And the enumerated offenses that are excluded, I think the legislature did a good job with that, but quite frankly, there's probably some others that should have been in there. And so that's kind of the nature of what it is. But clearly from the arguments, from the text, history, and structure of that, I think it's pretty clear that that's what it meant. Yes, sir.
Yes, Scott Powers from Florida Politics. The $1.3 million appropriation you said you'd be seeking to support Eric. What does that cover? Secretary Lee, perhaps, can answer this. And also, I assume there are going to be some local costs to the individual supervisors' offices, and I'm wondering what sort of range and how those are expected to be covered.
So the 1.3 is our estimate to cover. In order to join ERIC, one of the things you have to do is every federal election cycle, you have to send a mailing to all eligible but unregistered adults in the state. And so for us, obviously, we're a bigger state. The number of people who are unregistered, I don't know that proportionally we're that much different than other places, but just our size. So we're looking at, I think, between 4 and 5 million. So in order to make that mailing, that is going to require probably about 1.3 million. In terms of the cost on the local, maybe you can, I don't know what that would be.
It's really going to be up to the state. I believe they said they were going to be doing the mail-in, but it's going to be a discussion we'll have later down the road
But
with that.
I think he meant is there any other costs beyond that you'll have to?
It'll actually be a cost savings because right now we have a lot of people on the roll that we send information to that no longer exists. So this will help actually give more integrity and security to our election process because our addressing will be more correct with each voter.
If I could follow up, ma'am. Would this then require, in many cases, of the supervisor's officers, rededication of personnel to be able to focus on the ERIC part of it, or is this something that just becomes part of it?
We're doing list maintenance continually, so it's not really going to be, it's going to be a learning curve, but it's not really going to require more staff to implement.
Yes, sir.
Governor, it's great that ERIC has, we joined 30 states, is that what I heard?
29, I think.
Shouldn't this have been all along, and should it be now, maybe on a federal scale, the White House and Congress getting together to make all 50 states in the same kind of a network like that?
You see, but here, I think the problem with it is that, elections in our country are inherently local. We have 67 different supervisors here. Really, Secretary Lee does not conduct an election. I mean, she'll eventually tabulate, but these are the folks that conduct the election, and they all do that in their counties. I personally think that is much better than trying to do more control in one central location. I mean, just think of the issues with like cyber. If only one entity did the election, well, guess what? That means I think you're more vulnerable then. When you have all these different counties, it's very difficult to do. So I think the decentralized nature is good, and I think decentralized decision making. So I would encourage more states to join it, but I don't think we need necessarily the federal government to require it. I know there's been different things that have been done, federally, but I think that this seems to be working. These folks really wanted to do it. Other states, I think, like it. I think it does save them some time and effort, and so we'll see how it goes. But I looked at it and I didn't really see. I didn't necessarily want to do the money because obviously I'd rather save money. And I'm skeptical that we're going to get some huge response for this because we in the political side, people spend big money to try to get voters registered. If it was just as easy, just send them a postcard and they all fill it out. Well, man, that would make it much easier. And that's really typically you got to do more outreach than that. But nevertheless, it is what it is, and so we'll do that. And I think hopefully we'll end up doing Telemundo.
And in the past, Florida has had so many problems with elections, especially county. How accurate will be the system and how fast will the system will be?
So, obviously in 2000, we had epic problems, but I would say it was not in most of these counties. I mean, it was really a smaller part of the state, that had a lot of the problems. And so, as there have been some fallout from the last election, so there have been changes made in a couple of those counties. And, I think that the folks here do a good job. I think Secretary Lee's working hard with them on the election security. I think Eric will be helpful just for confidence. And so, I don't think there's any reason to think that somehow there's not going to be accurate. I mean, it's been accurate. Hopefully we don't end up in a situation where we have any type of like in 2000 or a couple counties in 18, we want it to be as smooth as possible. But even when you've had some of those issues, the accuracy, I think, hasn't necessarily been in question. And so that's really important for people. And even the instances that were enunciated in the one report about the two counties here in Florida, it's important to tell people that had no effect on anybody going to vote, counting the vote, none of that. It never penetrated into any of that. And the way these things are set up, getting into one of those things would not give you access to vote counts or any of that other stuff. And so that's very, very important. So really, I think given what happened in 16, not 18, 16, I think we've really done a lot to make sure that there's just no questions. But even with 16, I don't think there's anyone that could look at those facts and say there was somehow anything wrong with the vote count, because there wasn't. Everything was legit and on the up and up. So we'll obviously want to strive to do that in 2020. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Good job.
Thanks, man. Thanks, guys. Yeah, appreciate you so much. Thank you. Good to see you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Made our day.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Good to see you guys. Thank you, pal. Thank you.
That'll teach you. You just made the money. Oh, wow. Easy back roll.
Okay.
I'm just going to do